There we go. It's a way of introducing this new guitar. Well, it's a second-hand, probably fourth-hand guitar for me. It's a 6-course guitar, meaning it's got 6 pairs of strings. So there's a lot of strings. And the first string, though, is singles. It's a bit like a 12-string guitar today, but this was the 18th century, late 18th century version of it. And it has a single first string, 4 unison doubles, and then an octave pair, low and high. At the moment that's equivalent tuned down to D, drop D tuning. And that was a minuet by Fernando Sor. Now, Sor would have played one of these guitars when he was young, certainly as a kid and possibly as a teenager, and so did Aguado. So the two greatest Spanish guitar composer players of the early 19th century started life playing 6-course guitars. Moreover, when they published their music, they'd moved to Paris, started publishing their music. The fashion there was for single strings, and that was a fashion that was taking over most of Europe. Playing guitars with single strings, sometimes 5 single strings, sometimes 6. But back in Spain, people were still using these guitars. As late as 1836, remember Sor died in 1839. In 1836, an English traveller to Spain said they were still making these instruments. And so it's very likely that Sor's music, while played everywhere else in the world on single strings, including today, during Sor's time in Spain, they were playing his music, if at all, on double-strung guitars. So it's known as a 6-course guitar, and this one is not as ornate as some of them. It was made by Lourdes Uncila in Madrid, I imagine about 8 or 10 years ago, and I don't know which model she used to copy, but some of them are very blingy, very ornate. I quite like a bit of restraint in this one. very nice back, 3-piece, and what else? It has pegs, not modern machines, and it's a bit of a pain getting the two strings in tune together with each other perfectly. And Aguado wrote in one of his methods a number of reasons why you shouldn't play these guitars. You should be playing single strings, and he does mention how difficult they are to tune, and the intonation can go out up the neck. Well, the intonation's not too bad, and he was trying to promote single string playing. Now, some of these guitars were eventually strung with single strings, and I'll do that in another video later to hear what it's like with gut and silk strings like I use in my other guitars. At the moment we've got copper wound basses apart from one, the 6th string, which is silver wound, and these have a silk core. Then I have 2 pairs of gut strings, and the first string was a gut string. I was using a Quilla gut, but it was hideously out of tune up here, so I've put back on it's actually a nylon string, or nylon, I think. Carbon, that's the word I was looking for. I think it's a carbon string. So that helps it keep in tune up in that height. Now, there is a fairly large body of solo repertoire for the instrument by people like Ferrandier, whose music I'll be recording in some future video, and a few other composers, and some of them from the so-called New World, in Mexico and Peru. So it'll be interesting to explore that. I've only had this short time. I'm trying to feel under the soundboard. It doesn't feel like fan bracing. It feels like stepped bracing, because these instruments came from the Baroque guitar. Baroque guitar had 5 pairs of strings, and they had a number of dispositions of the strings, with what we call fundamentals and octaves pairs. But one of the dispositions they had was to have all the inner strings in unison, and this helped when you're accompanying singers or playing on ensembles. And so they added a 6th string to extend that bass register, and so that was a Baroque guitar really with 6 courses of strings. But the fashion of music had moved on from the Baroque, and we're into a very early classical period when this guitar was developed. So you can think of it as a 6-course Baroque guitar or an early classical guitar. I could play Baroque guitar music on this with some degree of success. Again, it depends on the disposition of the basses and octaves. One of the composers, I think it was Vargas y Guzman, for this instrument preferred to have octaves on the bottom 3 courses, and that would be very close to a Baroque guitar. So one could play Baroque guitar music on it. As it is at present, it's very similar to the old vihuela from the 16th century, a large vihuela. Of course, it's got metal frets now because when they introduced wound strings, the windings would cut into the gut frets, and so they put metal frets on. And there's no rose in the middle, like in a vihuela or lute. But apart from that, it's pretty much a vihuela. All I need to do is tune the 3rd course down a semitone, and I can play vihuela music quite happily on this. So it's an interesting instrument altogether. there's going to be a lot of repertoire for me to explore, considering pretty much all of Soar's music and Aguado's music was published when this guitar was still popular in Spain. And their music, although written with the expectation of single strings, would have been played on double courses. And so there's a huge repertoire there, plus the original repertoire for this instrument. And Boccherini wrote his quintets, a string quartet and guitar. There's 6 of them to get through. So there's a lot of repertoire, and I'm looking forward to get into it. That's it.